With their magic number down to 11, the Mariners will send their top 3 starters to face the A's down in Oakland. We'll go over those matchups, discuss which Mariners should be guaranteed roster spots in 2023, and if there's a recent World Series winner who compares well to the Mariners on today's episode of Locked On Mariners. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe to the show and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you want to hear from us even more, consider signing up for our Patreon. The link as well as our social accounts are in the description of the show wherever you're watching or listening to this. The Mariners kick off a 3-game series with the A's tonight. We'll be diving into the pitching matchups and some other notes in a moment. Later on, we'll talk some off-season because we've actually received a few requests to do so as of late, and there's some stuff we want to get into, like which Mariners should be guaranteed their current role in 2023 and what our expectations are for what they'll end up doing. Plus, is there a recent World Series winner who the Mariners compare to? We'll get into that later on in the show. But first, let's start with these pitching matchups. Colby, the Mariners kick off a 3-game set with the A's tonight down in Oakland, and they will lead things off with Luis Castillo on the bump facing JP Sears, who's been pretty solid since coming over in the Frankie Montas deal with New York. So this is likely the Mariners' toughest challenge, offensively speaking, when it comes to the pitching matchups on Oakland's side of things. But let's talk about Castillo, who did not have a good start his first time down in Oakland as a Mariner. How would you like to see him bounce back coming off of that?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think when you look at a guy like Luis Castillo, it's kind of tough because he doesn't have like amazing command, right? But his stuff is so good, it moves so much that essentially what you want is you want to just avoid the middle of the plate. It doesn't matter if you're middle, like if you're like outer third, but not right on the outside corner, like that doesn't really matter that much with Castillo because the stuff is so good. It's just stay out of the middle third of the plate, and he should be fine. So yeah, it's kind of a fluky thing what happened down in Oakland last time out, but Castillo's been very good since he came to Seattle, and I would suspect that he'll have another good outing tonight. Just kind of do what he does, which is tremendous stuff, and kind of try to avoid that one big inning. And if you can do that, then the Mariners have a very good shot of winning this game. So we'll see. Tonight might be a good night to try out the changeup a little bit. He's been a lot of fastball slider since he's come to Seattle, and the changeup has traditionally been his best pitch. So we'll see how he decides to attack this lineup. Second time. But I would suspect that Luis Castillo is going to have a pretty good game tonight.
And then Robbie Ray is going on the bump tomorrow, and Ray, of course, did not have his best start last time out. Also did not have very good defense behind him to help him out either. So how would you like to see him bounce back coming off of that performance?
Yeah, Robbie Ray's last start was weird. He wasn't good, but he was a lot better than the line would indicate. So, it's again, he was kind of trying to grit his way through a night where he didn't really have his best stuff. And the defense just failed him at every opportunity. So tonight, we'll see what kind of defense, or tomorrow, we'll see what kind of defense they play for Robbie Ray. I would suspect we might see a few more two-seamers, try and get the ball on the ground some, get up less hard air contact. He's been very fastball slider heavy recently. He's really been racking up the strikeouts as a result. But I do think he needs to use the two-seamer a bit more, try and get outs earlier in the count. The last few times out, he's run up pitch counts in one inning or two that have kind of drastically shifted his momentum to get deeper in game. So I'd like to see him get some out early in counts. I'd like to see him be aggressive with the two-seamer. And if he does get, 0-2, 1-2, then go ahead and put him away with the slider. So I like a few more two-seamers in this outing, kind of more of a ground ball Robbie Ray that we saw in the middle of the year, and see if that can maybe help him go a little bit deeper in this game.
A's countering with James Caprillion tomorrow night, and we'll see how that goes. Thursday is going to be a matinee game because the Mariners have to travel to Kansas City afterward. So we'll be doing a post-game show after that one, and that's going to be George Kirby for the Mariners, Adrian Martinez for the A's. How deep do you want to see Kirby go in this game? Because we've talked about usage over the final couple weeks, and you and I are both in agreement that Kirby should be slated to start one of those 3 wild card games. So where would you like to see his usage wind up in this game on Thursday?
Yeah, it's about pitch count for Kirby right now. It's not an innings thing. The Mariners have been very careful with his pitch count all year. Haven't really pushed him. Typically what happens is if Kirby finishes the inning and he's around or above 85 pitches, they typically don't push him for another inning. So I think they just kind of continue to roll with that. It's probably too early to intentionally short script him. Maybe next week when they get back home is a better time to do that. But I think it's just the same, business as usual. He goes 85 pitches and however many outs he can get on 85 pitches is how long his outing is. So I think that's probably what they're going to continue to do. I wouldn't be shocked if they do it with Gilbert in Kansas City the following day as well. I just think those are the 2 arms you're really trying to kind of nurse down to the finish line so they have something left in the playoffs, but it's about pitch counts. It's about, high stress pitches. It's not about innings pitch. So Kirby's been, motoring lately and then very few high stress pitches on his arm. So I imagine he's feeling really good. And so they just kind of stick with the plan that's gotten him here.
So the magic number is now down to 11 after the Mariners win yesterday and the Orioles lose to the Tigers, shockingly 11-0. Orioles playing some pretty bad baseball as of late. They're kind of tailing off. White Sox are making a late charge, but they've got 3 big games coming up against the Guardians, including 2 of which where they're going to have to face Tristan McKenzie and Shane Bieber. So we'll see how those games go for the White Sox, who, of course, not the most offensively inclined team this year and been dealing with injuries and all that. But things could really change here for the Mariners. Playoff wise, and I'm talking about in a positive sense here. If they can start rattling off some wins again, get back on the horse here, and take care of business, especially against one of the worst teams in baseball with the A's, and on top of that, if the Orioles keep on losing and the White Sox don't fare too well, I mean they pretty much have to sweep the Guardians, I would think, to really make this even remotely interesting. The magic number is just going to continue to go down and down and down. And if it's not already a foregone conclusion, it will be that the Mariners are going to clinch here in the next week or 10 days or so. I'm still looking at that Texas series, when the Mariners get back home as potentially the day that they officially clinch. But I'm pretty confident that this team can make a fairly deep run into the postseason. I really, this is going to sound homerish, but I don't think it's out of the question that they can make a World Series run because you just look at the way that this team has played against really, really good opponents. Even the Astros, they went 7-12 against the Astros this year. At times it looked like, obviously Houston's the far better team, but anything can happen, especially in a best of 5 series, if that were to be the ALDS matchup for the Mariners, if they, are able to advance. But, is there, just going back into our memory banks here, Colby, and we'll be talking about this in just a second, is there a recent World Series team that compares well to the Mariners? Maybe an unlikely World Series team. There's one that definitely comes to mind. I'll be telling you that in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the hashtag or the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs, #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. My throat does not want me to read this ad read right now. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonmlb. That's linkedin.com/lockedonmlb to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you again for making us your first listen. This is the Locked On Mariners podcast. So, Colby, since we've been conscious watching baseball, is there a World Series winner or just a contender, someone that made a deep run into the postseason that wasn't particular or necessarily meant to, that reminds you of this 2022 Mariners ball club? Is there an actual comp for this team going into the postseason?
Yeah, it's a little bit different, this team is, than a lot of past World Series contenders. I know people, Kansas City is always kind of the team that, they surprised, and 2 years in a row they went to the World Series, and you can certainly see why. There's some comparisons there. You look at the bullpen. Both teams have very good bullpens. You look at the rotation. Both teams had really big starters without probably having a true ace. I mean, those Kansas City teams had James Shields and Johnny Cueto, and the Mariners are going to have Castillo and Ray, and so you can see why there's some comparisons there. But I think that one kind of falls apart when you look at the offense. The Mariners are very home run dependent offense. Kansas City was much more about putting the ball in play and stealing bases. And so that comparison to me kind of falls apart a little bit. I think maybe what you're looking at is let's not look too far back. Last year's Braves team, that's a team that just pitched and pitched and pitched, and they hit some big home runs, and they did it with enough frequency that they won the World Series. So I think last year's Brave team is actually a pretty good comp. I heard one that's kind of interesting. It's from the way back machine, but the 2003 Marlins, who beat the Yankees, kind of just a young upstart team, and Julio is the Miggy, and Kirby is the Josh Beckett, and Robbie Ray or Luis Castillo is the Dontrell Willis, and you just kind of make the comparisons there. That's a team, again, top-notch starting pitching, really got hot at the end of the year. And they had a young superstar. They had a bunch of veterans who had good years but not great years, and then they just pitched and got enough big hits around. Pudge was on that team, Pudge Rodriguez. Derek Lee is kind of Ty France-ish. So I do think there's some comps there, but I think the best comp might be last year's Braves team. Not having to go too far back, but again, that's a team that just pitched. They had a deep bullpen, and they had a lot of guys who could crank a big home run, and that's kind of what the Mariners offense is built on right now. Will somebody hit the big 3-run homer or not?
For me, it's pretty recent as well. It's another AL East or NL East team rather. It's that Nationals team, a Nationals team that went deep into the postseason, beat the Astros of all teams in the World Series, and did it a year after losing Bryce Harper. And now obviously there isn't a comp to be made there for the Mariners, but Juan Soto became the face of that franchise, just like Julio Rodriguez has become the face of this Mariners franchise this year. I think we could see, especially with the way that Julio was playing pre-back injury, and we'll see how that impacts him if at all, but Julio's got what it takes to take over an entire postseason. Like, he can be the Juan Soto for the Mariners. He can, and he's just built for that moment. But on top of Julio, right, on top of the obvious, and let's just say it, lazy comp between Julio and Juan Soto, pitching wise, I think this team matches up pretty well with who that Nationals team was. Great bullpen, which they built upon at the trade deadline. And a great rotation. Obviously, the Mariners don't have Max Scherzer, but they have a pretty good consolation prize in Luis Castillo. And on top of that, I think they have, a Patrick Corbin, a Steven Strasburg, basically. I mean, like, maybe someone that's a little bit under Strasburg, but look, like, this is one of the best rotations in baseball, one of the best pitching staffs overall in baseball, which is what the Nationals had. And by the way, Nationals also started that year off really poorly. just like another team that I know, and they were able to storm a massive, unlikely comeback mid-season, completely change the face of their season, and get into the postseason and work their way up from the bottom throughout the entire postseason field, taking out some of the best teams in the league. And I think the Mariners are able to do that because they've proven that they can do that. And they've proven that they can go toe-to-toe with literally anyone. Again, they went 7-12 against the Astros, but they didn't go like 1-18. They did win some of those games. They did also play some close games. And sometimes those games, they really, didn't have any business being that close because you think about that series in Houston, that nightmare series in Houston when Julio goes down and France goes down, and they got, was it Brennan Bernardino? Was that his name? Like they got him pitching like a high leverage inning in extras, So I think this team at full strength, and we'll see, how full strength they can get, with Gino, etc. But I think this team can go toe-to-toe with anyone, just like that Nationals team did back in 2019. And they have a lot of comparable pieces. The one thing to me where it's like, okay, who's the Anthony Rendon? Right? Because Anthony Rendon was a huge part of that, especially the World Series for the Nationals. I mean, that could be Mitch Haniger. That could be Ty France. Can't necessarily count on those guys, though, with the way that they're playing right now. The obvious comp would be Gino because, well, one, they play the same exact position, but two, Gino was just on a heater before the injury, but how is the injury going to impact him? So, but is Carlos Santana the Ryan Zimmerman? There's a lot of cool, little, just player comps that you can make. Obviously, some of them are going to be lazy, but when you look at the situations and when you look at what both teams went through over the course of a regular season, I see a lot of that 2019 Nationals team in this team, man. And I felt that, for a while now, just going back to, even back in May when they were struggling, I think I was talking about this is what they would have to do in order to get back into the postseason. They would basically have to be the Nationals, right? And they've basically been the Nationals. And so why not continue that into the postseason? And also the Nationals in 2019 reached their first ever World Series. Why can't the Mariners also reach their first ever World Series just in the way the Nationals did just a few years ago? I think there's just too many comps to make there, man, for me not to pick them. So, but I like the Braves call. The one thing that I would say on the Braves thing is just maybe the way that the team was built, right? Because the situation that they found themselves in, obviously the star of the team, the face of the franchise, Ronald Acuna Jr. goes down, but they have Freddie Freeman still, and they go out and they trade for Jorge Soler, and they trade for Eddie Rosario, and they who else did they add? Adam Duvall. Yeah. Favorite of ours from Fan Fiction Fridays and all that. But yeah, and they were able to kind of patch things together and make that run. So maybe that's where and the Mariners haven't necessarily done that. It's mostly been an over reliance on guys getting healthy and coming back. But but that's another situation there where it's like, okay, the Braves don't have a chance. You go into the postseason, it's like they don't have a chance. They're with all the injuries they've sustained and just the way that roster is built, there's no way that they're going to beat the Dodgers, right? And that's kind of how you feel with the Mariners. It's like, yeah, they're good. They're a team on the rise, and they have really good pieces, and they have a pitching staff that can compete with anyone. But the Astros are just so good. You think about how hot the Mariners have been over the last few months, and it's like they've actually lost ground on the Astros during that time. That's how good the Astros have been. But maybe the Astros are the Dodgers. Maybe you get to the ALCS or the ALDS. I think you would prefer the ALDS because you only have to win 3 of those games instead of 4. But maybe you get there and, the pitching matchups just line up well for you. And look, you're not going to have to play all of those games at Minute Maid Park. They are going to have to come to Seattle at some point, for at least one of those games. So anything can happen, man. I really do think that anything can happen. I think this team, they got to get healthy, but they can make a run. This team is talented, and they've proven time and time again that they can go toe-to-toe with any team in the league. So, but yeah, I look at that Nationals team, and it's just like they there's a lot there. There's a lot there that's very similar. Anyway, so let's talk about the offseason a little bit. Let's look ahead. Let's look past the postseason. I know some people might get upset about this because the Mariners are in the middle of a postseason race, whatever. But some of you have actually requested that we talk about the offseason. Some of you have asked, like, what will the Mariners do? What do you think the Mariners will do? And you put out a tweet from the infamous Control the Zone account yesterday that, of course, riled people up, and people took it out of context. Mm-hmm. I don't know if like people just are purposely trying to take stuff out of context, or it's literally like they don't understand what you're saying, or like I'm the only one who's fluent in Colby speak. But I can translate for those that need me to. I can translate here. So Colby, just remind me, what did you say? What was your exact wording with this tweet?
Yeah, so essentially I was thinking ahead to next year, which, I do on occasion, since, the team building is my favorite part of what we talk about here. And so I was just looking ahead, and I was like, there are a lot of players on this team that people are just assuming like you can't move on from. You can't, you just keep them, right? And they just stay on this team next year, and like they're locks. Like they are definitely going to be on this team next year. And I thought there was too many. People were naming too many. And so what I went out to do is I basically said, the list of players, like the exact tweet is, a complete list of players who should be guaranteed at least their current roles for the 2023 team. My list was Julio Rodriguez, Luis Castillo, Robbie Ray, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, and Cal Raleigh. That's the whole list. No, I didn't leave off that guy. And immediately, big numbers for us. 76 people decided to chime in on that thought process. 76 review or
comments,
replies. Yeah. Yes. So,
did you get ratioed, by the way?
No, I did not.
Oh wow, look at you.
151 likes.
Hey,
so
there you
go. So yes.
All right. So let me just get this out of the way, because I saw a couple people. I'm gonna leave them nameless, but a couple people that I don't know, for some reason you live rent free in their head. They just can't block you and ignore you like I do with every single person that I don't like and don't agree with. But I saw people saying, "Oh, well, he wants to leave Ty France off of the team. He says that Ty France shouldn't make the Mariners in 2023. That Eugenio Suarez shouldn't make the Mariners in 2023." Okay, again, verbatim, you said they shouldn't be guaranteed their current role in 2023. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that says they should be off the team. They shouldn't be a starter. They shouldn't, whatever.
There's no such thing as nuance.
Now, to be fair for that side of things, I'm just, look, we're friends here, Colby. We're friends here, and we use the show, or we should hold each other accountable on this show.
We'll see.
Colby, do you think the Mariners will legitimately upgrade over Eugenio Suarez or Ty France this offseason?
No, probably not.
Okay. Then
probably not. But it doesn't mean they shouldn't try. That's the point.
But do you think? But isn't it a waste of time to leave those guys off the list if you don't think that they're actually going to be upgraded over?
No. Because Ty, let me ask you, if you have a chance to go get Jose Ramirez, are you going to say no because we have Gino at third base?
And so, all right, so that's what you're saying. And again, to translate what Colby's saying here, right? It's just like if you had the opportunity to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at first base over Ty France. Let's just say the Blue Jays, this would never happen. Again, this would literally never happen. Blue Jays come to you and they're like, we'll give you Vladimir Guerrero Jr. for Jake Shiner, right? Like you're not taking that because like, well, I already have Ty France, right?
Right. Of course you're not.
So
that's
what Colby is saying. However, where we disagree is I think it's just pointless to say that because that's never going to happen. So Ty France and Eugenio Suarez are guaranteed their spots in 2023.
Let me ask you this. All right, let's just no, they're not. Let's flip it on like this, Ty. Should the Mariners just ignore Jose Ramirez or just ignore Jose Abreu at 1 year, $12 million?
No.
Okay, so why can't Jose Abreu be the first baseman and Ty France be the DH?
By the way, isn't it funny too that this is
That's
coming
not
from
the same role.
Isn't it funny too that I'm seeing these complaints from the same people who are like, why didn't they sign Freddie Freeman this offseason?
Yep.
This is exactly what you're talking about. It's like, well, if Freddie Freeman is there, yeah, entertain it.
Go get him.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's where we're at right now. And it's funny too, because Ty France hasn't even had that good of a year. He's not. Like, it's good on like the grand scheme of baseball. It's a good year. But for Ty France, he took a step back this year. There's no debating that. Is some of that injury, riddled reasons? Sure, probably. But let's stop pretending that he didn't take a step back. Ty France last year is better than Ty France this year. Period. Why can you not say, oh, he has to start 145 games for us at first base? Why? He has to? No. You know what has to happen? Julio has to play 135 games. Cal Raleigh has to be your starting catcher. You shouldn't trade any of those 4 pitchers, starting pitchers. They should be in the rotation entering next year. Nobody else is that true for. JP shouldn't be the everyday shortstop next year. And if you could push Gino into a situation where he is this year's Carlos Santana because you upgraded at third base, you're just going to say no to that? Of course you're not. And by the way, anybody who's coming at me with Munoz or Swanson, you're dumb. You're dumb. 0 relievers deserve an automatic place on your roster year in and year out. 0. There is not a reliever in baseball good enough that you were just like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, obviously you can't. No, I mean, you can't move on from that guy. Doesn't exist. That does not exist. So, yeah, if I can trade Andres Munoz for Randy Arozarena, you're darn right I'm going to do it. So, yeah, Andres Munoz should not have the guaranteed role that he has this year because I can trade him and get better. Does that mean they should trade him for whatever they can get? No. And you know that. Not you, Ty. You, the people responding, you guys know that because you're not stupid. I mean, you're dumb, but you're not stupid. You know what I mean? So you know exactly what I'm saying here. You're trying to pick apart, but Jesse Winker doesn't automatically deserve the same at-bats he got last year. Mitch Haniger doesn't deserve the same role that he has this year. JP Crawford doesn't. Adam Frazier doesn't. The backup catchers, everybody else in the rotation, everybody in the bullpen, third base. You can upgrade in all those places. First base, you can upgrade. Is it likely that you're going to upgrade in all those places? No, which is why I'm not saying you need to burn the thing down and rebuild it. I'm not saying you need 20 new players. Only a moron thinks that's what I'm saying. So, yes, I stand by my list. 6 guys who deserve the exact same role. Are there going to be more than 6 guys who have the same role next year that they do this year? Yes, of course there are. That's the way baseball works. But does that mean that you should guarantee them? Like, we're not even going to try to upgrade at first base. We're not even going to try. Like, something falls in our lap and we can get a third baseman, and all of a sudden, oh, look at that. Gino's now the DH/first baseman / occasionally plays third base guy. You're just going to say, oh, no, because we have to have Gino play third base. You guys wanted to replace him with Kyle Seager 3 months ago. So shut up. Shut up. Like I said, some of you guys are dumb, but I know you're not stupid. So let's just use some logic. Let's use some reasoning. Let's use some, nuance here and understand what the tweet is actually saying. There are 6 players on the Mariners next year who absolutely deserve to be exactly where they are right now.
What I just heard you say was that Gino Suarez sucks, Ty France sucks, and should never play baseball ever again.
See, that is what you would hear. Because, again, you're dumb, but you're not stupid. Although, So, yeah, and you know what? When I trade Matt Brash for Brandon Lowe this winter, I'm going to make you wear that. So, there you go. Nobody but those 6 guys absolutely has to be on the roster next year. And absolutely has to have that same role. None. It doesn't mean all 20 of the other ones have to go. It just means that those are the 6 guys you're not moving on from. Those are the 6 guys that you are building around next year. And everything else is an ancillary piece. That's the core. Everything else is that's the framework, right? The foundation are those 6 guys. It's different, right? Some guys are written in permanent marker. Some guys are written in pen. A lot of guys are written in pencil. And those 6 guys I named, those are the permanent marker guys.
All right.
Can't tell me I'm wrong.
No.
Tell me I'm wrong, Ty.
No, I knew what you were saying. I understand what you're saying. And for the most part, I agree with what you're saying. I think it's kind of silly to just leave Ty France and Gino off of there because, like, you know what you're doing. You know what you were doing. You knew what you were doing when
they're pen guys.
when you wrote that.
They're pen guys. Are they permanent marker guys? You're telling me you would not trade Ty France for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. right now?
Obviously, I mean, obviously.
You wouldn't trade Ty France for Freddie Freeman.
But that's not going to happen.
I know
that's
not,
my
but,
point, right? Like
again, yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're not permanent marker guys. Like if Ty France ends up playing 100 games at first base next year and 60 at DH, that's a different role than he had this year, is it not?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So
there you go.
So quickly, we don't have a lot of time here, but I did want to ask this, or just like get a little bit into this at least. What do we think the Mariners, like, just kind of with the information that we have now, and of course the next couple weeks, next month or so, depending on how far into the postseason they could go, could change things in theory, at least a little bit. But for me, like, I think what this team ends up doing in the off season, in the winter, is pretty straightforward. I don't think there's going to be a lot of moves from this team in general. And I think it's going to be a very focused offseason and very focused messaging that we're going to receive from Jerry Dipoto, that we need to get more athletic and we need to lengthen the lineup. Because defensively speaking, it's a tire fire out there for the Mariners. They need to get significantly more athletic in the corner outfield spots. And at second base, because now with the shift being banned, you can only have 2 guys on each side of the infield. You're going to need someone who's athletic, who can play second base. I think that ends up being J.P. Crawford, and they end up getting a shortstop.
You hope it's J.P. Crawford.
You hope that it's J.P. Crawford. But
you hope that it's J.P. Crawford.
Me personally, yes, I hope that it's J.P. Crawford.
I have other plans.
Okay.
I'm going cheap.
Okay. Colton Wong.
Just to annoy all of you, I'm going cheap.
You're like, here's Ramon Urias, guys. But yeah, so I think, we're not going to see a ton of moves from the Mariners. I think it'll probably end up being pretty spread out.
Less volume, more impact.
More impact. Corner outfield, really, and I think the big thing here is what happens with Mitch. Because if Mitch continues to struggle, I agree with Ryan Divish at that point that I don't know if the Mariners want Mitch back, right? So you might need to address 2 corner outfield spots because, like you said, Jesse Winker shouldn't be guaranteed literally anything next year. And there's a non-zero chance he gets traded, even though that I think it would be a little silly to sell low on him. But if he just doesn't make sense for your roster, he doesn't make sense for your roster. But you're going to need to do something in the corner outfield spots to get a lot more athletic and just more defensively literate, I guess, because Jesse Winker is the complete opposite of that right now. And you're going to need to address the middle infield. I don't think there's going to be a lot done pitching wise. Maybe a reliever or 2 that they take a shot on. Obviously, the minor league guys, they're always going to sign some of those, and you always got to pay attention to those because at least one of them is probably going to pop. I don't know if they address the back end of the rotation, though. Like, I think they should. Obviously, they should. Like, Marco Gonzalez shouldn't be guaranteed anything next year, in my mind. Chris Flexen, if he chooses to opt in, shouldn't be guaranteed anything, in my mind. But I think mostly the focus, you're probably hardly going to hear the word pitching come out of Jerry Dipoto's mouth when he talks about what the Mariners need this offseason. I think you're mostly going to hear, like, we're pretty good on that front. We got Luis Castillo. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, aside from what they, do in free agency, I think the big, one of the biggest things they end up doing is extending Luis Castillo. But that's really what I expect from this offseason for the Mariners. What about you?
Yeah, I think Jerry will talk about run prevention, not pitching, which is his code of, like, we're not going to go get starting pitching, but we are going to go try and upgrade defensively, right? I think that's how Jerry's going to kind of word, like I think they'll ask about starting pitching. He'll be like, well, run prevention is incredibly important, as you know, and according to these metrics, we did these things well, we didn't do these things well, and so we're going to try and upgrade our ability to keep the other team off the scoreboard. And to me, that's corner defense in the outfield. So yeah, I would suspect that maybe it's. I mean, obviously Jerry's always going to tinker with the bullpen. He'll sign some MILB guys and things like that. I would expect one major. Uh, I'd expect one major like corner outfield ad, probably either a platoon or some kind of like, upside play, average, but at least average type of other corner. And then I think Jerry will be interested in the big shortstops, but I also don't think he's going to be able to land any of them. And I have some other ideas for that area, but I do think that's where maybe he goes. Not saying volume plays is a bit misleading because I do think there are some really interesting options that we can get into at a later date to kind of cover second base and also upgrade places like the bench at the same time. So I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see, an average corner with some upside. I think you're going to see a plus corner. And then I think they're going to they're going to try to add one of those big shortstops. If they can't do that, then I think they're going to try and add a platoon situation at second base, who can also maybe play some shortstop or maybe some third base, things like that. So I would expect, most of the money, most of the resources to be spent on the offense. But you never know. Jerry's just a creative guy, and that's why we can't rule out things like he trades Andres Munoz or Matt Brash or Paul Sewald or maybe Luis Castillo. I don't know. Probably not, but maybe. No. You never know with Jerry. You never know. But I do expect there to be an emphasis on run prevention, which will be code for outfield defense.
Yeah. Outfield defense and second base, whether that's, someone that they already have in house, like JP, he moves over there, or, whatever. Because, you just need someone with range, and Adam Frazier is just not that guy. Which, God, that sucks. It's honestly the most disappointing thing about Adam Frazier this year. The bat, struggling, whatever. He's had years kind of like this in the past, so there was obviously some risk that you assume there when you acquire him, offensively speaking, but defensively, man, I thought they were getting one of the most elite middle infield clubs that they could get on the market, and he has been nowhere near that. Kind of surprising, the regression there on Frazier's part, but so it's going to be a busy off season, not necessarily in terms of the volume of moves, but there's going to be a lot to talk about, a lot of different ways that the Mariners can go about this, and it'll be a lot of fun to dive into. We'll talk about it again, here and there as the season, continues to move along. But obviously our focus right now is on 2022 ball club, but we'll get to all the off season stuff eventually. And because there's going to be plenty of it once we get into the off season, whenever that happens, whenever the Mariners are finally done playing games. But that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, that's CaneGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Now make your second listen to the Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts, just like us. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.